Okay, afternoon, Adam. Afternoon, Pete. Thanks for joining us today. We've had this idea for quite a while of trying to get us all chatting about sports that don't make me laugh, and us technophobes basically got there after a couple of weeks of planning to be able to talk more broadly about some of the sort of financial, investment, and legal issues impacting on a lot of our clients, basically in the sports and entertainment world. And just by way of background, myself, Adam and Pete, we work really closely together on a range of different clients across entertainment and sport. And we thought we would, at least for about half an hour or so, chat about the variety of issues going on at the moment. So by way of brief background, Pete Hackleton is a partner at Saffery Champness LLP, which is one of the top 15 accountancy firms in the UK. Pete is the head of the sports and entertainment team, which has 9 partners, 50 full-time members of staff. And you'll be pleased to know Pete hasn't given me too much extra description to explain about himself, but they currently represent over 80 Premier League players on all aspects of their tax affairs, as well as a number of clubs, agents, and rights agencies. Pete, thanks very much. I literally am like a Z-list presenter right now, trying to do the bits here, but
You're doing really well done.
Mate, I've got forging a new career at some point. And also, Adam, mate, thanks very much for joining as well. So Adam is a partner at Tilney, which is a national financial planning and wealth management firm. 30 offices across the UK with 200 financial planners. You'll be pleased to know they manage upwards of 25 billion for their clients. And most importantly as well, because we all work together, a lot of things, Adam has real specific sports related experience, worked in the space for over 12 years, working predominantly with Premier League players and international footballers and musicians and clients across rugby, boxing and cricket. So that is the intro for you guys. Very briefly, I'm a partner in a law firm called Sheridans, and I work usually across lots of different sports, football as well being one, and generally on the player and agent side. And that's why a lot of the time Adam, myself and Pete do work quite closely together on a variety of different issues that crop up. And on that note, Adam, if I can just turn to you first, basically, because obviously some of the issues that we've talked about in a professional capacity over the last couple of months as well have obviously been significant, obviously, with COVID-19 and the pandemic at the moment. You obviously work with players on all of their financial planning and investment strategies generally. What are the types of things that sportsmen and women and entertainers are sort of facing in the current climate at the moment?
I think the biggest question that I've had probably over the past 6 weeks from a number of clients, the same type of messages: am I going to be safe? Am I okay? Is my money okay? Because generally, with their financial affairs, they're quite conservative with what they want to do, and sort of investing money or planning for the long term is relatively new to them, or it's moving into the slight unknown, and they are sort of relinquishing control of their finances to somebody else. So their biggest fear is, even though they understand about how we work and the size of Tilney and the background and so on, they're worried that they may lose all of their money, even though that's not the case. And the biggest concern is always, have I got less than what I put in? Am I going to still be okay? Can I still retire? Because, they have a really short career. People, sometimes think of footballers as all playing for Man City, Chelsea, Liverpool, earning the really, really big money, but there's a number of players that don't, and they may only earn good money for 2 to 8 years, and that is their time to put away enough money that is going to see them and their families through maybe for the rest of their lives. So it is a fundamental part of their future. And depending on what their age is, if they're early 30s, late 30s, late 20s, that they're coming towards technically the end of their career and their top earnings. So it's really, really important that their money is protected.
And then if I can ask just one other bit as a continuation, which is then, what are the types of then, without obviously preaching confidences, the types of conversations generally that you're having with lots of different people around what's happened over the last month or two and the sort of volatility as a result?
A lot of it is, how long do you think this is going to go on for, and do you think there's going to be a recovery? I think they're the main two things that generally we get asked, and I suppose both of those are, a lot of it depends on how long we are effectively in lockdown for, because, outside of football, generally the longer this goes on and the lockdown goes on, the harder it's going to be for businesses. Most businesses can sustain things from like 0 to 6 months. Once you go outside that, businesses may get into trouble, and then the knock-on effect for there will be worse for the economy, with a potential recession and so on, which means it will take longer for markets to recover. Whereas if we're in a situation where, a vaccine is found quite quickly, people come out of lockdown and return to work, and there isn't a stage 2 and 3 of this thing, and life gets back to normal, we will see probably markets recover potentially at a faster rate. And
from your side, Pete, obviously there's obviously the investment angle, but obviously also, we've seen, the daily government press conferences, Matt Hancock a little bit ago coming out and effectively putting pressure on players to give up a decent amount of their salaries, collective PFA approaches to that, and then obviously bilateral approaches that then have been taking place between the clubs and their players, and some of those intricacies too. What's your view on that generally, and what do you think then the wider implications of these type of narratives are, well, from your point of view?
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I mean, it was a strange one, wasn't it? The government statement a couple of weeks ago, and there's a great tweet from one of the players, David Cottrell, on Twitter, where he said something like, "There's more than 2 million millionaires in the UK, and there's 500 Premier League footballers." It seems a strange kind of narrow focus helping out, and certainly, a lot of the players we work with, they're obviously concerned, but the players were already talking about what they could do to help, and I just thought the government interference was unhelpful. I mean, a 30% salary cut across the board for Premier League footballers, I don't really see how it helps, because I think there were quite a few calculations around at the time which said, if that's effectively, £500 deferred from salaries, then there's going to be a hit to the exchequer of somewhere in the region of 250 million with social security and income tax, which is not what the country needs at the moment. There's a concern about, if there's a salary cut, who benefits from that, themselves or the owners. So obviously the players have done some work with various foundations now, players together, a couple of other things. One of the things that is always apparent to us when we're preparing tax returns each year, obviously the players do earn a lot of money, but the charitable giving is quite considerable, and something like this always brings out that kind of the best side of them. I suppose the other thing that is a frustration to us is the ongoing focus on the players from HMRC anyway. Reams of enquiries about players with no structures. They're just ordinary employed individuals, and there's a lot of focus on that. Obviously HMRC are very stretched at the moment, and hopefully that might lead to a bit of a slowdown in those kind of enquiries. The other thing, obviously looking outside of football, other sports in many ways more badly affected. We look after lots of golf players, tennis players, outside of those top kind of 10 or 20 in the world. It can be not the most lucrative, and with endorsement contracts on hold, no tournament income, it's difficult times. So across sport, I think the impact has been felt.
And more broadly as well, if we're taking that specific example in mind, and then as a general idea, what do you think, if we're talking about football particularly, what are the sort of key tax considerations for Premier League players in this sort of pretty uncertain climate, this sort of current climate we're seeing right now?
I mean, players are pretty much paying 45% tax on all of their income. To the extent that income is being deferred, it's the gross income that's been deferred. So effectively, the tax goes down proportionately as well. But of course, even though players do, in general, in the Premier League, they're on good salaries, the expenditure often matches, and they're helping out family members with mortgages and things like that. So it is just a question of, speaking to Adam and their advisors, making sure that they're not overstretching themselves. Obviously, some of the players will have image rights companies, and quite often they might look to borrow from those companies, and that can cause problems down the line, tax implications of borrowing from those companies. So it's just probably something that they need to consider along with their advisors, the best way to structure their spending.
And Adam, then if I can turn just back to you for a second on that particular point, which is obviously one of the things that I understand, at least, is one of the main important bits that you are constantly speaking to your clients about at different times, is, I guess, managing the risk, having a pretty stringent investment management process, and remain, you tell me if, ultimately it's not the time for knee-jerk reactions right now. How are you messaging that to all of your clients at a time when sometimes there might be deferrals on the horizon, sometimes there might be quite big dips in investment portfolio, etc.?
I think it's just, a lot of it is just staying in contact. So, I mean, you will both know that predominantly we'll communicate with, especially the footballers, on WhatsApp. It's the main sort of source almost of communication. So I've had probably a lot more over the past sort of 3 or 4 weeks WhatsApp conversations. What I've been trying to do is share information on WhatsApp. So as I read articles or where you see things that are interesting, sharing them with the clients that are maybe concerned, sharing charts showing what's happening in markets at particular times, especially when markets are falling. That's when people need sort of care and attention, and you need to do some hand holding. And I suppose we were talking about it just before we came sort of to record this. A couple of weeks ago, after the crash, there was a 3-day period where stock markets recovered 15%. So one day they returned 9.5%, and then it was sort of up to 14% over the next couple of days. And it was at that point when I was discussing with this sort of group of footballers and showing them the charts along the way, and showing them that, and the importance of remaining invested and not panicking when there is a bit of a downturn, because you will always miss that upside. Once they saw this chart after that period, they understood it, and there's been sort of more calm, because they understand that there are going to be times things can't always go up, things will go down as well, but you need to understand the reasons for it, how your money is invested, how it's positioned. Most of the footballers I work with are conservative investors, so their exposure to the stock market within their portfolio might only be 25 to 30%, so it's quite low. And I think you have different conversations with different people at different ages. I've got, when we're talking about deferral of wages and so on, I've got one footballer whose contract's up at the end of June, and for him, he's getting paid 3 more times, and after that, he has no idea what his pay is going to be, if he's going to get another job, and so on. So for him, the next few months are critical. He's got mortgage, he supports his family, his brothers, sisters, parents, which sometimes gets forgotten about when people are looking at footballers, the amount of people that they support, mortgages they pay, as well as the charitable giving. And then I've got some other clients who are right 35, 36 in the final year of their contract. And for them, we've put together a plan to see whether they can live the life that they want to in retirement. And now you're having to reassess all of that, given the fact the markets have come down. So there's a lot of reassurance that's needed, and a lot more communication. We do a lot of articles and podcasts recently, so we've been sharing those around. They're quite well received. People have got more time on their hands.
Definitely do. That's one thing some of us do. So, Adam, based on then when you were just talking before about constant communication and speaking to the clients more in depth, obviously, because they've got more time on their hands, and obviously the financial implications of the crisis and what's been going on. I guess part of what you're trying to do as well is manage players' short-term and long-term objectives. Short-term, if there's deferrals, and we'll talk about wage deferrals and reductions in a minute with Pete. If there are those things, that they do have some liquidity to a degree, but at the same time are thinking about retirement and thinking about 30 years in the future for some of their financial plans.
I think understanding understanding what people spend, especially in the sort of sports and entertainment space, is really sort of fundamental, because often when I started doing this job, I remember sitting down with some people and, you know, they didn't have any understanding of what they were paying, what their general bills were. I remember I had one footballer, he still had Sky TV at a house in Nottingham that had been empty for 9 months. And all that's not a lot of money. It all builds up and it adds up. And one of the first things I always like to do is try to get people to understand what they spend, because even if you are a Premier League footballer earning very well, you know that you can pretty much spend what you want, but it's a much bigger problem when you're not earning money and you don't have a clear understanding as to what your expenditure is, how quickly you can deplete any cash that you might have. So understanding what people need on a month-to-month basis or an annual basis is fundamental. We do some sort of longer-term sort of cash flow planning with them, which will show effectively, we'll run it until their retirement age, which could be 35 to 38, and effectively their income falls off a cliff to zero. And then we need to see, actually, can you live the rest of your life if you never worked again, or if you coached earning 20, 30,000 pounds a year? Can you maintain your standards of living that you need all the way into retirement? And that's why you see, especially footballers, they have, you know, unlike us who have like 20, 30-year mortgages, you might have somebody who's got a 5-year mortgage, which is actually 50% of someone's net pay. So when people often think, well, footballers earn a fortune, often 50, 60, 70% of their net income could be going to a mortgage. You know, that we're having conversations with them about potentially, you know, the mortgage holidays and deferrals and so on, the things that everyday people are considering at the minute as well.
And on to that point, Pete, then, you know, Adam mentioning about some of the issues to do with salary deferrals, salary reductions, etc., even at the Premier League clubs, and we're seeing a variety of those in the public domain, if it's Watford and Chelsea and Arsenal and others, and Southampton as well, I believe, that have been reported. What are sort of some of those wider issues to consider from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, the different arrangements at different clubs have all varied to a greater or lesser degree. I mean, one of the things that we've noticed is most of the deferrals are not going to be kind of on a rolling base, currently on 1920 salary. So for players, as Adam refers to, players who are coming out of contract or players who might have been expecting to sign a contract this summer, that will have implications. They're also, in certain agreements, the deferrals are based on certain parameters. So perhaps if clubs were to qualify for certain tournaments, the deferral may change. So there's no real clarity around that at the moment. We also, obviously, all the players' contracts are different, and some players will have most of their remuneration paid via base salary, but quite often there are loyalty bonuses and things like that built in, and does the deferral apply to those? So lots of grey areas. From a pure tax perspective, I guess probably the most pressing area to clarify is around the agent's fees. As you guys are aware, quite often, well, in almost all cases, the club will pay the agent's fee, and effectively 50% will be treated as a benefit in kind on the player. If the agent's fee is a fixed fee, and the player's been subject to tax as a benefit in kind on 50% of that, that becomes a proportionately greater percentage of their overall package, and can push their effective tax rate up, you know, towards and beyond 50% in some cases. I guess the other point around that, and again, this is probably more of a point for you, Dan, is around the agent's fee itself. If the agent's fee is X% of gross salary and the gross salary has been deferred, presumably that knocks onto the agent's fee as well. Yeah,
so one of the things we're thinking about there, just generally when we're possibly giving advice, is, you know, does the agent's fee as a proportion get deducted? Is that agent's fee excluded? If it is, what portion of it? Presumably it might only be the player element, because obviously the agent is representing the club in different ways as well. So yeah, there's a few different elements to all of that. And I think, whereas we saw before, as we mentioned, that initially, at least, the Premier League was trying to come to some arrangement, or the PFA and the Premier League were trying to come together for some type of uniform approach. What we're seeing, because that obviously didn't really happen and didn't really work, is that these bilateral discussions are now taking place. And, you know, at the best of times, it's hard to get, you know, players, management and coaches, everyone to agree, especially in this type of climate. It's very difficult. And what we're seeing really is varying, as you've mentioned, varying approaches to that, at least what's being reported in the press as well. So, yeah, it's interesting times at the moment, I think. And what at least I'm seeing is quite a lot of reactive stuff in the market. So it's almost like some players or coaches or entertainers as well are, you know, looking to do what's best for themselves, for the club, for the industry, from a reputation perspective. We've seen loads of players obviously want to give money, and rightly so, to good NHS causes as well. One of your colleagues, Reese, wrote a great piece on that recently as well. So I just think the other thing that would be quite handy as well is, if you compete, I know I haven't probably talked about it in too much detail, is to actually demonstrate the advantages from a tax perspective of players donating out of their gross salaries, or rather their net salaries, rather, from a charitable perspective maybe as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we've picked up a lot of queries on from players. I think it's probably true across society. It's just not very well understood, the way that gift aid works and the relief that's available. I was going to plug him as well. Reese's blog on tax in sport, it summarises it really well. But effectively, if you have a player who is contributing £100,000 to Players Together or one of the other charitable, effectively the way that works is, the player gives 100,000, but the government then grosses it up for 25% tax. So the charity receives 125,000. The player then can then claim tax relief in the tax return, and they get tax relief on the 125,000 at 25%, which is another broadly 31,000, just over 31,000. So net, the player's given away £69,000. But the charity has received £125,000. So effectively, on that 69k, the player's had his 45% tax relief. It's a really good way of funding these charities and making sure that they can, you know, do maximum benefit with the funds that they're given. And, you know, like I said earlier, we do see the players generally tend to be quite high charitable givers, but perhaps hadn't realised the tax implications of that. So it is an important one.
And I think maybe just as a last point for all you guys, because we were talking before about working from home, the challenges that faces. We've all got kids, all trying to manage different things at different times as well. Is like, maybe just generally, how are you guys finding it? What are you guys doing in your spare time a bit? What podcasts you're listening to? What you're reading? What you're actually managing to do? I know Adam's got some lovely spa suggestions for us that maybe you can chat to us about. So yeah, maybe Adam, do you want to kick us off?
I said one of the things is Jackson's had enough of us guys. I don't think he wants to know. He wants to get out of the room. Pete, you can talk, and I'm going to go and let Jackson out. I
mean, you know, it's an unexpected situation, isn't it? We've got 3 boys. Obviously, they've got their online schooling, but other than that, the weather's been great, so they've been outside. I suppose, you know, from a work perspective, it's different. Sometimes the calls aren't as a substitute for seeing people face to face. Sometimes the technology doesn't quite work, but in general, it's worked pretty well. We're still quite busy. I've been entertaining myself by reliving my youth and trying to beat my boys at football. A few keep you up challenges, which I can send you a video of later if it's helpful. But in terms of reading, you know, my house is Harry Potter dominated. It just seems to be Harry Potter in my house. It doesn't matter how many times I've read them; I just want to read them again. So.
And you've been running as well, mate, by the sounds of it. Tell us about
that. Yeah, I've been trying to put a few miles in while I've been off. I was saying to one of my colleagues earlier, I'm 42 years young. I've done 1 half marathon in my life before lockdown. I've now done 3. So I don't know what it is. If you can only run 1 today, make it a long one. I think that's the suggestion. So aiming to knock a couple more minutes off. I want to go under 1 hour 40 before I get back to the office, and too many meals and too big to run.
Pete, my record was an hour 39 back in the day. So
well, I do like a target, you know that.
There you go. For us, I've always worked sort of fairly remote anyway. Tilney, the business made the decision 6 weeks ago for everybody to work from home, and it's been seamless in terms of speaking to my team and dealing with people, having sort of conference calls and phone calls. You do sort of miss the face-to-face contact with people, but people are adapting. Myself and my wife, we've got 2 children, so we're sort of homeschooling them. We both had what we think is a mild form of COVID for 2 weeks, where it just sort of dragged on. I think I shared with you it
was great content, mate. You did the mustard challenge, didn't you, or something like that?
Yeah, because I think Andy Goldstein did it on Talk Sport originally on his Twitter page. I think he ate an onion, a lemon, and vinegar, and I had English mustard at home, soy sauce and vinegar. And I thought, let's record it. And I was really nervous because I knew I had no sense of taste or smell. And I was just like, well, I hope it doesn't blow my ears off. But I had a spoonful of English mustard, Coleman's, and it was fine. I couldn't taste anything. It's still not 100% my taste. And in case anyone noticed, my daughter decided to paint my nails on Saturday, and my wife won't tell me where the nail polish remover is. So they're on at the minute.
Can't believe you used your daughter as an excuse.
Yeah, I'm a secret gothic, maybe. I've been doing a lot of exercise as well. Like we've got some nice sort of fields out the back, sort of the back of my house. So it's been really nice. The weather's been amazing. I think that's helped everybody.
Yeah.
In the current climate, with the weather, if it was raining and miserable, it would probably be a lot tougher.
What about you, Dan? How are you filling your time?
I'm just I'm basically turning into a presenter rather than a lawyer.
Any YouTube stuff, Dan?
What's that?
Any YouTube stuff?
Thank you for asking. So I'm hoping to finish my career as a lawyer any day soon and live off the Google AdSense revenue basically from my 60 viewers on a daily basis. So yeah, that's the plan. But in the short term, I was just like, well, I've been wanting to try and do some YouTube stuff for ages. So I've done a short football industry course for people to tune into, which is cool. And the same with just some like career and sports stuff as well, just in my evenings. But it takes a bit of planning and all the rest of it. But I've really enjoyed it. It's getting me out of my comfort zone a bit, and it's always there just on YouTube for people to be able to watch and listen to. So it's been fun. I mean, it hasn't stopped everybody taking the mickey, but anything less.
And the guitar, is that yours?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that.
I took out the loft. I took out the loft about a month or so ago. Good. So maybe next time I'll play you a tune.
You can play the exit music at the end.
As long as it's not Liverpool related, right?
Mate, we'll do You Never Walk Alone when we pick up the title if possible. Perfect. Well, no, guys, thanks very much for joining. It was great to have you on, and we'll get this out on audio and on video, and it'll great to have another chat soon again.
Good stuff. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Yes, bye.